What if everything we've been hearing about the Cleveland Browns is only part of the story? For months, the national conversation has been almost identical wherever you look. Analysts, former players, and NFL insiders have pointed to the same conclusion. The Browns are rebuilding. After a dramatic offseason filled with roster changes and difficult decisions, many believe Cleveland has finally accepted that it's time to focus on the future instead of chasing immediate success. On the surface, that conclusion seems perfectly reasonable. But what if the Browns themselves don't see it that way? Behind closed doors, there are signs that the organization could be preparing to send a completely different message, not through press conferences or carefully worded interviews, but through the moves they make before training camp even begins. Those decisions won't simply affect the 2026 season. They could reveal exactly what Andrew Berry and the front office believe this team is capable of over the next several years. That's why the next few weeks may be far more important than most fans realize. What's fascinating is that Cleveland has been unusually quiet while speculation continues to grow. Every day, new theories appear about contract extensions, possible trades, and the future of key veterans. Some believe the Browns should move proven stars while their value remains high and collect more draft capital. Others argue that keeping experienced leaders is the only way to remain competitive while younger players continue to develop. Both sides make compelling arguments, and that uncertainty has created one of the most intriguing storylines of the entire offseason. The biggest clue may not come from a blockbuster trade or a surprise free agent signing. Instead, it could come from what the Browns decide to do with the players already inside their building. Every contract negotiation, every roster decision, and every rumor is starting to point toward one much bigger question. Is Cleveland quietly preparing for a long-term rebuild, or are they getting ready to prove that the rest of the NFL has completely misread their plan? And that's exactly where things become even more interesting. Because while everyone has been focused on the quarterback situation and offseason speculation, two defensive stars may actually hold the answer to the biggest questions surrounding this franchise. For much of the offseason, the Browns have found themselves at the center of one conversation. Has this franchise officially entered a rebuild? It's a question that keeps surfacing because on paper, Cleveland looks very different from the team fans watched just a year ago. Several major changes reshaped the roster, familiar faces moved on, and the organization appeared more focused on getting younger than making headline-grabbing additions. Around the league, that combination usually signals one thing: a team preparing for the future instead of pushing all its chips into the current season. On the surface, that perception only grew stronger as national media began projecting Cleveland as a team likely to prioritize future draft capital over short-term wins. It's a strategy we've seen plenty of NFL teams use successfully. Trade established stars, stockpile draft picks, create salary cap flexibility, and build a younger core capable of competing a few years down the road. From the outside, many believe the Browns were following that exact blueprint. But the organization has consistently pushed back against that label. Andrew Berry and the front office haven't spoken like executives preparing for a complete reset. Instead, they've emphasized building a roster that can stay competitive while continuing to develop younger talent. It's a difficult balance to strike, but it's one Cleveland appears determined to maintain. Rather than tearing everything down, the Browns seem intent on reshaping the roster without abandoning the expectation of winning football games.
That approach explains why so many of this offseason's decisions have been harder to interpret than usual. Some moves point toward long-term planning, while others suggest the Browns still believe they can challenge sooner than many expect. It's created an unusual situation where every roster decision is being viewed through two completely different lenses. Are these the moves of a rebuilding franchise, or the calculated adjustments of a team trying to stay competitive while preparing for the future? The answer may not come from a press conference or another public statement. Instead, it could be revealed by what happens with two of the Browns' most important defensive leaders, players whose futures could tell everyone exactly where this franchise is headed next. If there's one player who perfectly represents the crossroads the Browns are facing, it's Denzel Ward. Ever since Cleveland selected him in the first round, Ward has developed into far more than just one of the league's better cornerbacks. He's become one of the faces of the franchise, a homegrown star who has remained a constant presence through coaching changes, roster turnover, and seasons that ranged from disappointing to playoff caliber. When fans think about the Browns' defense, Ward is almost always one of the first names that comes to mind. That's exactly why his current contract situation has attracted so much attention. While Ward still has time remaining on his deal, conversations around the league have intensified because of how valuable elite cornerbacks have become in today's NFL. Teams are always searching for players who can consistently shut down top receivers, and Ward has repeatedly shown he belongs in that conversation when healthy. Because of that, some analysts have argued that Cleveland could receive a significant return if it ever chose to explore trade possibilities. Those discussions don't necessarily mean the Browns are shopping him. In fact, there has been no confirmed indication that the organization is actively trying to move Ward. Much of the speculation comes from outsiders trying to predict what a rebuilding team would normally do. If Cleveland truly believed its championship window was years away, trading a proven veteran while his value remains high would make sense from a purely business standpoint. That's the argument many around the NFL continue to make. But there's another side to that debate, and it's one many Browns fans strongly support. Elite cornerbacks are among the hardest players to replace in the league. Even with multiple draft picks, there's no guarantee a young prospect develops into someone capable of matching Ward's production, leadership, and experience. Letting go of a player who has already proven himself could create a hole that takes years to fill, especially for a defense trying to establish a new identity after such a transformative offseason. Beyond his performance on Sundays, Ward's leadership carries weight inside the locker room. Younger defensive backs look to veterans like him for guidance, and his familiarity with the organization provides stability during a period filled with change. As new players arrive and coaches continue implementing their vision, having respected veterans can make the transition much smoother. That's something statistics alone can't fully measure, but NFL front offices certainly consider it when making major contract decisions. This is why many believe an extension would send a message far beyond Cleveland. If the Browns commit to Ward for the long term, it would suggest they still see themselves as a team capable of competing, rather than one focused solely on collecting future assets. It would tell the locker room that proven leaders remain part of the organization's vision, and reassure fans that the front office isn't abandoning the present in pursuit of a distant future. On the other hand, if negotiations drag on without meaningful progress, speculation will only continue to grow. Every week without clarity is likely to generate fresh rumors, fresh trade proposals, and fresh debates about the franchise's direction. Whether those rumors ultimately amount to anything is another question entirely, but they highlight just how important Ward's future has become. And as significant as Denzel Ward's situation is, he isn't the only defensive leader whose future could shape the Browns' plans. Another key starter is entering an equally important stage of his career, and his next contract may be just as revealing. While Denzel Ward has drawn plenty of headlines, Grant Delpit's contract situation may be just as revealing when it comes to understanding where the Browns are headed. Unlike Ward, whose future is tied to the long-term guarantees remaining on his deal, Delpit is approaching a critical point in his career where every decision carries extra weight. That alone has made him one of the most closely watched players as Cleveland inches closer to training camp.
Over the past few seasons, Delpit has steadily evolved into one of the emotional leaders of the Browns secondary. Early injuries created questions about whether he could live up to the expectations that came with being a highly regarded draft pick, but he continued working through those setbacks and eventually became a dependable presence on the field. His versatility allows Cleveland to disguise coverages, support the run, and make life difficult for opposing quarterbacks. Those qualities don't always dominate highlight reels, but they're the kind of traits coaches value every single week. That's why fans paid close attention during off-season activities when discussions about his contract began heating up. Reports surrounding his status naturally sparked conversation across Browns Nation, with many wondering whether negotiations were progressing behind the scenes or whether the front office was simply waiting until closer to the regular season. Because contract talks usually happen out of public view, every small update, or lack of one, quickly becomes the subject of speculation. Adding to the curiosity was the fact that Delpit, like several other veterans around the league, became part of ongoing discussions about whether Cleveland should prioritize proven players or future draft capital. Some observers believe extending him would reinforce the Browns' commitment to maintaining one of the league's strongest defensive foundations. Others argue that if the organization believes it's still several years away from true contention, maximizing the value of veterans before their contracts expire could accelerate the rebuilding process. Neither viewpoint is unreasonable, and that's what makes Delpit's situation so fascinating. A long-term extension wouldn't simply reward one player for his development, it would signal that the Browns want continuity on defense, despite all the changes taking place elsewhere on the roster. Stability matters, especially when younger players are expected to step into larger roles. Veterans like Delpit help bridge that gap by providing experience, communication, and consistency in one of the NFL's most demanding defensive systems. There's also the leadership factor, something that often gets overlooked during contract debates. Following a transformative offseason, Cleveland's locker room has naturally changed. Losing established voices means others must step forward, and Delpit has gradually earned the respect of teammates through his resilience and steady improvement. Keeping players who understand the culture and expectations inside the organization can be just as valuable as adding new talent from outside. Of course, until an agreement is officially reached, the rumors won't disappear. Every passing week without an extension is likely to fuel fresh theories about what the Browns might be planning. That doesn't mean a trade is imminent, far from it, but uncertainty tends to create speculation, especially during the quiet stretch before training camp. For now, the only confirmed reality is that Delpit remains an important piece of Cleveland's defense, while his long-term future continues to be one of the biggest unanswered questions of the offseason. But just as fans were trying to decode what Ward and Delpit's situations might mean, another storyline quietly began gaining traction. This time, it wasn't about the defense at all. It was a quarterback rumor that, while still unconfirmed, added an entirely new layer to the Browns' offseason puzzle. But just as fans were trying to decode what Ward and Delpit's situations might mean, another storyline quietly began gaining traction. This time, it wasn't about the defense at all. It was a quarterback rumor that, while still unconfirmed, added an entirely new layer to the Browns' offseason puzzle. Just when the focus seemed locked on contract negotiations, another storyline quietly entered the conversation. This one centered on the quarterback room and a familiar name around the NFL, Mac Jones. Reports and speculation began linking the former first-round quarterback to Cleveland, leading many fans to wonder whether the Browns were considering another move before the season begins. While the rumors generated plenty of discussion, it's important to separate what's been reported from what's simply being debated online. As of now, there has been no confirmed indication that a trade is close. The speculation largely stems from the belief that the Browns could benefit from adding another experienced quarterback if the right opportunity presented itself. Jones has already started games in the NFL, and despite an up-and-down career, still has experience that younger quarterbacks simply don't possess. That alone makes him an interesting name whenever teams evaluate ways to strengthen their depth chart. The timing of the rumors also makes sense from the San Francisco perspective. If a team has multiple options at quarterback, it's natural for other organizations to check in and ask about availability. Reports have suggested that if the right offer ever arrived, the 49ers could at least listen. However, reports have also indicated that the likelihood of a deal remains uncertain, and no credible source has suggested negotiations are nearing the finish line. At this stage, it's best viewed as off-season speculation rather than an imminent transaction.
For Cleveland, the conversation isn't really about finding a new franchise quarterback. If the Browns were to explore a move like this, it would likely be about adding affordable experience and creating more competition in the quarterback room. Veteran depth has value over the course of a long NFL season, especially when injuries can change everything in a matter of weeks. Having another player who has started meaningful games could provide insurance without forcing the organization to make a massive financial commitment. There's another reason analysts continue connecting Jones to teams like Cleveland. The Browns are still evaluating their long-term direction at quarterback, and adding a veteran wouldn't necessarily interfere with those plans. Instead, it could give the coaching staff another experienced option while continuing to develop younger talent already on the roster. If that scenario ever became reality, it wouldn't automatically signal that Cleveland had found its quarterback of the future. It would simply be another piece of a much larger strategy. That's why this rumor has become more interesting than the player himself. Whether the Browns pursue Jones or not, the discussion highlights the front office's willingness to explore every possible avenue to improve the roster. Successful organizations constantly evaluate opportunities, even if most conversations never result in an actual deal. During the offseason, dozens of names are connected to teams every year, but only a handful of those rumors ever become reality. For now, Browns fans should treat the Mac Jones reports with cautious curiosity. They're worth monitoring because they offer insight into how the league views Cleveland's quarterback situation, but they shouldn't be mistaken for evidence that a move is inevitable. Until a credible report confirms serious negotiations, the speculation remains exactly that, speculation. But here's what makes this entire story even more intriguing. The Mac Jones rumors, the contract talks surrounding Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit, and every other offseason headline may actually be pointing toward one much bigger question. What is Andrew Berry's master plan, and when will the Browns finally reveal it? When you step back and look at the Browns' offseason as a whole, it starts to feel less like a collection of separate stories and more like pieces of one much larger puzzle. The discussions surrounding Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, and even the Mac Jones rumors all seem to lead back to a single question that no one outside the organization can answer with certainty. What is Andrew Berry actually building? Every move the Browns have made has fueled debate because each one can be interpreted in two completely different ways. On one hand, Cleveland has made decisions that suggest long-term thinking. The roster has become younger, the organization has invested in developing fresh talent, and many around the league believe the Browns are positioning themselves for sustained success rather than chasing a quick fix. That's the approach many successful franchises have taken in recent years, accept short-term growing pains in exchange for a stronger foundation that can compete consistently in the future. If that's the vision, every decision this offseason begins to make sense. At the same time, the Browns haven't behaved like a franchise that has completely accepted losing in the present. The front office has repeatedly emphasized competitiveness, and there has been little indication that the organization wants to strip the roster down to the bare minimum. Instead, the Browns appear determined to maintain a team capable of winning games, while gradually reshaping the roster. That's a much more difficult path than committing to a full rebuild, but it also avoids wasting valuable seasons while younger players continue to develop. This balancing act explains why every contract negotiation has become so significant. Extending respected veterans would suggest the Browns still believe their current core can compete. Allowing those situations to drift or choosing to move proven players for future assets would naturally strengthen the argument that the franchise is preparing for a longer-term reset. Neither approach is necessarily right or wrong. The challenge is deciding which path gives Cleveland the best chance to build a sustainable winner. Another factor working in Andrew Berry's favor is flexibility. Unlike some organizations locked into one direction, the Browns still have options. They can continue investing in young talent while keeping experienced leaders around the locker room. They can remain aggressive if an opportunity improves the roster, or they can stay patient if they believe the biggest payoff lies a year or two down the road.
That flexibility allows Cleveland to adapt as new opportunities emerge, instead of forcing decisions simply to satisfy outside expectations.
What's fascinating is that the front office hasn't shown much interest in responding to the growing speculation. Barry has consistently allowed the team's actions to speak louder than off-season headlines, and that approach has only increased curiosity. Fans, analysts, and rival executives are all trying to read between the lines, searching for clues about the Browns' true intentions. Every rumor, every contract update, and every roster move is being examined for hints about the organization's long-term vision. The reality is that the Browns don't need to publicly declare whether they're rebuilding or trying to contend. Their decisions over the next several weeks will answer that question more clearly than any interview ever could. If key veterans remain in Cleveland and receive long-term commitments, the message will be obvious. If major changes continue, the conversation surrounding a larger rebuild will only become louder. And with training camp rapidly approaching, the waiting game is almost over. Several key storylines are about to reach critical turning points, and together, they may reveal exactly which direction the Browns have chosen to follow. As training camp gets closer, the endless speculation is finally approaching a point where real answers should begin to emerge. Months of rumors, predictions, and debate have created plenty of headlines, but eventually the Browns will have to make decisions that speak for themselves. That's why the next few weeks could be some of the most important of the entire offseason. If you're trying to figure out where this franchise is truly headed, there are 3 storylines that deserve more attention than any others. The first, and perhaps the biggest, is Denzel Ward's contract situation. Every day that passes without an extension naturally leads to more questions about his future. Ward has established himself as one of the league's premier defensive backs when healthy, making him an extremely valuable piece for Cleveland. If the Browns commit to him with a long-term extension, it would send a powerful signal that they still view their veteran defensive core as the foundation of a team capable of competing now. If negotiations remain quiet for an extended period, however, outside speculation will only continue to grow. While that doesn't automatically mean a trade is coming, uncertainty always creates room for rumors to spread. The second storyline revolves around Grant Delpit, whose future may be just as important, even if it receives slightly less national attention. Delpit has become one of the defense's most reliable playmakers and an increasingly respected voice inside the locker room. His versatility gives Cleveland flexibility in the secondary, and replacing that kind of player would be far from easy. Whether the Browns choose to extend him or allow the situation to play out will provide another valuable clue about how the front office views the current roster. Keeping both Ward and Delpit together would suggest continuity remains a priority, despite all the offseason changes. The third storyline is the quarterback conversation, particularly whether the rumors surrounding additional veteran options continue to gain momentum or quietly disappear. Every offseason produces dozens of quarterback stories, and most never develop into anything meaningful. The speculation surrounding Mac Jones falls into that category for now. Still, if Cleveland suddenly becomes more active in the veteran quarterback market, it could indicate that the organization wants more experience behind center while continuing to evaluate its long-term plans. On the other hand, if those rumors fade away, it may signal confidence in the quarterbacks already inside the building. What's interesting is that none of these decisions should be viewed in isolation. Looking at only one decision might paint an incomplete picture, but examining all 3 together could reveal the Browns' broader strategy. Imagine Cleveland extends both Ward and Delpit while standing pat at quarterback. That would strongly suggest the front office believes this roster is capable of competing without making dramatic changes. Now imagine the opposite scenario, where contract talks stall and roster rumors continue to intensify. The perception around the league would almost certainly shift toward the idea that a larger reset is underway. That's why every announcement over the coming weeks will carry more significance than usual. Even routine contract updates or reports from training camp could reshape the conversation overnight.
Fans often focus on splashy headlines, but sometimes the most important developments are the quieter ones that reveal how an organization truly sees itself. Andrew Berry and the Browns know exactly what message their decisions will send, not just to the locker room, but to every front office across the NFL.
The waiting won't last much longer. Once training camp begins, speculation will gradually give way to reality, and the Browns' actions will become impossible to ignore. Whether they double down on their veteran core or continue positioning themselves for the future, those choices will define how Cleveland enters one of the most intriguing seasons in recent memory. And once those decisions are finally made, one even bigger question will remain. Will this strategy ultimately put the Browns in the best position to build a lasting contender, or will fans look back on this offseason as the moment the franchise chose a completely different path? The decisions the Browns make before the season officially begins won't just shape the 2026 campaign, they could influence the direction of the franchise for years to come. Every successful NFL organization eventually reaches a moment where it has to choose between protecting the future and maximizing the present. Cleveland appears to be standing at exactly that crossroads. The challenge isn't simply deciding which players to keep or which rumors to ignore. It's determining what kind of team the Browns want to become over the next several seasons. One path is easy to understand: trade proven veterans while their value is still high, accumulate additional draft picks, create more salary cap flexibility, and allow a younger core to develop together. It's a strategy that has helped several franchises build long-term contenders, but it also comes with obvious risks. Draft picks are never guaranteed to become star players, and replacing experienced leaders is often much harder than it looks on paper. A roster can become younger overnight, but building a winning culture usually takes much longer. The alternative is equally challenging. Keep your established veterans, reward players who have consistently produced, and trust that the current foundation is strong enough to compete while younger talent continues to grow around it. That approach preserves continuity and leadership, but it also requires confidence that the existing core can still deliver meaningful success. If the front office believes this team is closer to contention than many outsiders assume, retaining key veterans becomes a logical investment rather than an emotional decision. That's what makes players like Denzel Ward and Delpit so important beyond their individual performances. They're not simply talented defenders, they represent stability. They've experienced coaching changes, roster turnover, playoff expectations, and difficult seasons, yet they've remained central figures inside the organization. When a team undergoes significant change, players like that often become the bridge between the past and the future, helping younger teammates adjust while maintaining the standards expected inside the locker room. Leadership is one of the few qualities that can't be measured on a stat sheet. Every NFL team has talented athletes, but not every team has veterans who command respect through preparation, consistency, and experience. Those voices become even more valuable after a transformative offseason. Younger players entering larger roles naturally look toward established teammates for guidance, and removing too many respected veterans at once can create challenges that don't immediately show up in the standings. Of course, there's another side to the conversation. If Andrew Berry genuinely believes the Browns are still a few years away from becoming legitimate championship contenders, moving veterans before their contracts lose value could ultimately strengthen the franchise. It's the type of difficult business decisions successful general managers sometimes have to make. Fans become attached to star players, but front offices must constantly balance emotion against long-term planning. In today's NFL, timing can be just as important as talent. Perhaps the most encouraging part of this entire situation is that the Browns don't appear to be acting impulsively. Every major move over the past several months has suggested a front office following a deliberate plan instead of reacting to outside criticism. Whether fans agree with every decision is another discussion entirely, but there seems to be a clear vision guiding the organization. Rather than chasing headlines, Cleveland appears focused on building a roster it believes can remain competitive well beyond a single season. That may ultimately be what defines this offseason. Not one contract, one trade, or one rumor, but the philosophy behind every decision.
The Browns have an opportunity to prove that they aren't simply reacting to circumstances, they're actively shaping the future of the franchise. And once training camp begins, everyone around the league will finally start seeing whether Andrew Berry's vision matches the one Browns fans have been trying to piece together all summer long. After months of speculation, debates, and countless predictions, the Browns are finally approaching the moment where actions will speak louder than rumors. Every headline we've discussed, from Denzel Ward's future and Grant Delpit's contract to the ongoing quarterback speculation, has really been pointing toward one simple question: what kind of team does Cleveland believe it is? Are the Browns preparing to surprise the league by staying competitive right now, or are they quietly laying the groundwork for something even bigger in the years ahead? The truth is, we won't have to wait much longer for that answer. Training camp has a way of cutting through off-season noise. Contract extensions, roster decisions, and the players taking the field will reveal far more than anonymous reports or social media speculation ever could. Once those decisions are made, the direction of the franchise will become much more clear, not only to Browns fans, but to every team around the NFL. If Cleveland locks up key veterans like Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit, it will be difficult to argue that this organization is waving the white flag. It would show confidence in the current core while continuing to build around younger talent. But if those situations remain unresolved and more trade rumors begin to surface, the conversations surrounding a larger rebuild will only grow louder. Either way, the Browns are about to send a message, and it's one that could shape expectations for years to come. That's why this offseason feels different from so many others. It's not just about adding players or making headlines, it's about revealing the philosophy behind every move. Andrew Berry and the front office have remained patient throughout the process, and now fans are waiting to see whether that patience leads to a team ready to compete immediately or one focused on building toward the future. Whatever happens, these next few weeks could become one of the defining stretches of the entire offseason. Now I want to hear from you. If you were running the Browns, would you give Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit long-term extensions, or would you consider moving one of them for future draft capital? And what do you think about the Mac Jones rumors? Would you bring in another veteran quarterback, or do you believe Cleveland already has the right pieces in place? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of the biggest debates facing Browns Nation right now. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Browns news, rumors, roster analysis, and training camp updates throughout the offseason. We're following every major development as it happens, and with so many important decisions just around the corner, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.